We are exactly 20 days away from Penn State kicking off its 2023 football season against West Virginia, and we're going to break down the schedule for you tonight, game by game. I'm Tim Aydin, BlackShoeDiaries.com. I'm joined by my trusty colleague, Patrick Koerbler, who replaces Marty Leap, who has moved on to Penn State's Rivals.com site. I think we both speak for Joe when we say Marty was a beloved colleague at BSD and will greatly miss him, and I will certainly miss having him on the show. But that being said, really excited to have Pat by my side going forward. Pat, if you want to introduce yourself to the masses, the floor is now yours, sir.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Tim, for bringing me on. Yeah, for those that don't know who I am, Patrick Koerbler, have been with BSD for a number of years now. I started way back in, I think it was June 2016. So going on over 7 years now, which is crazy to think about that. Like, right, if I was a kid in school, I'd be in kindergarten was 2016. I'd be in like seventh grade or something. I'd be like an angsty teen. So, excited to join the podcast. And it's a little scary, the idea that I'm going to have to come on after every Penn State game and just give my rapid reaction thoughts, because I'm generally someone, I like to take my time, right? I usually do like my kind of overarching theme posts like on a Tuesday or Wednesday when I could rewatch the game and kind of not be too emotional. So I might say some things this coming season that I regret, but that's the fun of it. So, but no, thanks, Tim. I was a big fan of the show last year and excited to be joining this year.
Well, excited to have you on board. And but if you're the angsty teen, I mean, for me, having been at Black Shoe Diaries since 2011, I guess it makes me the guy with senioritis,
Yeah, you're the boomer at BSD.
The boomer of BSD. Ooh, I'm going to get okay boomer tonight, aren't I? Anyway, so before we dive into the schedule, though, I just want to talk a little bit about what's been going on with fall camp, which started a little over a week ago. I guess about 10 days ago now. But yesterday was an open practice for, I guess fans could sign up and go attend an open practice for free. And the reports we've been reading, last 24/7 and on 3 sites, other sites, the common arching theme is that the defense, spectacular as usual. The offense, not so much. Now, granted, it was raining pretty heavily, but there was that caused some issues with ball security from the running backs. And apparently Drew Auer was sailing passes over receivers' heads. And, offense didn't quite look as in sync as you'd hope they would. So naturally, these being message boards, you've got a handful of people panicking and, already sounding the alarm on about the offense for this season and thinking the defense is going to carry the entire load. Pat, you've probably read these articles too by now. What are your thoughts? Should Penn State fans be worried at this point about the offense?
I'm going to go with no, right? I feel like, for those of us that have followed Penn State, which I imagine, right, you have, I have, and anybody who's listening to this have been following Penn State for a couple of years. I doubt this is your first off season of following Penn State football. And, going back to Paterno, from O'Brien, and then obviously even during Franklin, I think always the themes of, especially early on in summer camp and fall camp, is that the defense is going to be ahead of the offense. It's just kind of how football works. Obviously, when you have, offensive line and quarterback play and wide receivers, breaking in new wide receivers, it's going to take some time for those guys to gel. And that's not necessarily, not that there's not chemistry and synergy between defenders, but it's one of those things of defensively, you can kind of, guys can come in and play different spots and different rotations with different teammates and kind of still look on the ball. Whereas with the offense, things look disjointed and it can really, really kind of look messed up. So, no, I'm not greatly concerned. And like you said, the weather wasn't exactly perfect. But I think anybody that was going into those practices yesterday, thinking that Drew Auer was going to look like a Heisman, already the Heisman winner, and everything like that, probably a little bit misguided. But that's the whole point, right? It's only August 13th, and there's still a lot of time. I don't think people expect Drew to be who we think he will be for West Virginia, right? Who he will be for down the line against Ohio State and Michigan and Rutgers in games later on in the year. So early on in the offseason, not greatly concerned that the defense is ahead of the offense. And if we're being honest, I mean, I do kind of expect the defense. I won't necessarily say to carry the offense this year, but I think if you look at what is Penn State's main calling card going to be? I do think it is going to be, a really, really fantastic defense just because of what they have at defensive end and linebacker and safety and cornerback. There really aren't that many questions with the defense. So yeah, not worried at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned either. And I think maybe some of the people who are panicking and worrying already, they might have PTSD, from other former 5-star quarterbacks like Christian Hackenberg or Anthony Morelli not turning out to be who they were. But that's just, for one, Morelli, no amount of coaching was ever going to make him good. He was overrated to begin with. And then Hack, you could make a case, I suppose, if he had the same coach, like had Bill O'Brien all 3 years, and if he had something besides a patchwork offensive line, he may have turned out better. So I could give you Hack potentially, but I just think you have people. This is a different coordinator. Mike Yurcich has a very good track record as an offensive coordinator, and also the offensive line is in way the heck better shape than it was when Hack was lining under center 10 years ago. So it's an apples and oranges thing, and of course, you're going up against probably one of the top 5 defenses in the country already. Maybe the best. We'll find out. But of course, the defense is going to look better than the offense. But also keep in mind, this Penn State's offense, when they go up against just about every other team in the schedule besides Michigan and Ohio State, those defenses are going to seem like nothing compared to what they've had to go up against day in and day out. So, I would not worry about that. And also with Drew Aller, I guess I'm personally not expecting him to come out and light the world on fire against West Virginia in game 1. He will make some, spectacular throws. Don't get it twisted.
Sure.
But, also have some throws, maybe he gets a little, I definitely see him getting excited, stealing a couple of passes over wide open receivers' heads. It's probably going to happen. So brace yourselves, folks. But he will connect on a couple of those once he calms down a little bit. I remember Sean Clifford was kind of like that in the season opener against Idaho back in 2019. I remember
what a great game that was. 77
right?
Miss it.
Once that first touchdown happens, or that throws that first really great, but he'll settle down. Things will start coming to him more easily. And of course, this time around, he got that tremendous running duo of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen to help you out while you get your feet a little more wet. So, yeah, again, not concerned. So, I guess that settles that. So now we're going to go dive into the 2023 schedule. If you've been watching us for a while, maybe, for maybe the past year at least, you remember Marty and I did a similar thing like this last season. So we're just going to pull up, I'm going to just put it up on here to help visualize for you folks. I feel like I'm giving a college presentation here. So there's a schedule, as you can see. So we're just going to go game by game, just sort of break down our thoughts, maybe keys to the game, and then just give a prediction, each of us. So start off, of course, with West Virginia, which is Labor Day weekend. It's a 7:30 NBC. It's the debut of NBC's Big Ten Saturday night games. So it'll be Todd Blackwood actually just moved over to NBC. So he'll be doing the color analyst work along with Noah Eagle, who those of you who watch enough sports, that's the son of Ian Eagle, famed CBS.
I was going to say, I think Noah's younger than I am. So they're really giving him the reins.
I know he's like, what, 24, 25. It's like a Doogie Howser over there with the announcing. So, but he did call Penn. If you want to hear what Noah Eagle sounds like, just watch highlights of last year's Penn State Michigan State game, because he was doing the broadcast for FS1 on that. But yeah, this will be a Saturday night game. Not a whiteout, but it's going to be a raucous crowd regardless. The season opener, you're playing West Virginia, the old Eastern foe. They used to play every single year before they joined the Big Ten in 1993. So this will actually, this will be the first time in 31 years these schools are meeting. Me being a little bit older, Pat, I can vaguely remember as an 8-year-old watching Penn State, West Virginia, and it was kind of a more back and forth game back then. Penn State won by 2 touchdowns in the end. I don't anticipate this one being quite as close. I could see it maybe on the scoreboard at least being close for a little while, just because maybe the offense takes a little more time to get going. But I have a hard time just seeing West Virginia's offense really giving that Penn State defense a difficult time, though. I was actually on the West Virginia channel show Friday night, hosted by Joey Foster and the Wolfman. Great guys, by the way. Check out their channel sometime for West Virginia coverage. But they had me on to talk about this game, and the things they have going for them in offense really is their run game and the offensive line. CJ Donaldson, he's like their main back. He was actually on his way to he was averaging about 6 yards per carry last year before he got injured 7 games into the season. So he'll be a guy to keep an eye on. I imagine you're going to try to look into feed him the rock a lot, and because they'll be starting either Garrett Green or redshirt freshman Nico Markiel at quarterback, who's they're both, neither of them is like a accomplished passer, but apparently they both have some mobility. So you could see some RPO action being done there, or at least, basically they're going to try to do some ball control. Just try to, keep the ball out of the Penn State offense's hand as much as possible and just try to avoid getting absolutely killed. I just think this Penn State defense, even if they give up some big chunk plays on the ground early on, Manny Diaz will adjust quickly. And, once you've contained that run game, there's not much else for them to turn to, because they lost their top 4 receivers from last year. And, they got Devin Carter, North Carolina State transfer, coming in, who is probably going to be their go-to target for whoever's throwing them the ball. But after that, not much. And defensively, they were pretty bad last year. The second to last in the Big 12. They gave up 33 points per game. They lost most guys from that defense, so maybe it's an addition by subtraction situation, but I don't think game 1 in Happy Valley is a place for new starters to be, learning on the job. So this is a game that, could get ugly by the time you get into the second half.
Yeah, I don't see this one being much of a game. I don't mean to come on here and, first game that we predict, I'm going to say Penn State blow up, but right now the line, I think, depending upon where you're looking at it, it's 19 and a half. So Penn State's favored by almost, 3 touchdowns, which I think kind of says what type of game this will more than likely be. It's just tough seeing, this West Virginia team that has, lost some guys in the transfer portal, that, Neil Brown seems like he really is on the hot seat going into the season. Kind of a program that's just kind of, stuck and going in reverse. It's tough to see them coming into Beaver Stadium for a 7:30 night kick. I think this has to be one of like the first primetime kickoffs in a long time. I mean, I know Miami 2001, would that have been the last time that we had a primetime kickoff that opened the season? I'm trying to think, especially in Beaver Stadium.
Yeah, I think you're right, Pat. I think it was the 2001 Miami game.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else.
This ought to go like the opposite of that one, hopefully. So
yeah, we'll see. So that is a difference, right? Where that Miami team is coming in with some future Hall of Famers and some literal like All-Pro NFL players. West Virginia, I don't think, has too many All-Pros on this team. Like you said, I think their ground game could be pretty good. I know they returned a decent bit on the offensive line and recruited quite well there. Wyatt Milum, their left tackle, is a guy that Penn State fans will remember as a top 100 prospect. Doug Nestor back in the day was committed to Ohio State, and Penn State thought they were going to flip him. He ended up at Virginia Tech, and I was transferred to West Virginia on their offensive line there. So, and just kind of, I think one of the questions for Penn State going back to that Michigan game last year is how they're going to hold up against the run. Other than that Michigan game, they did quite well. So I'm not expecting, West Virginia to give them too many problems on that front. But yeah, I kind of agree with you that I think Penn State's going to come out and quite honestly blow out West Virginia. I wouldn't be surprised. I kind of get the feeling, I was at a wedding this week, a Penn State wedding. So of course we talked about the team, and I kind of get like a 2008 feeling with this schedule, kind of how it sets up, where that Penn State team came out and really blew out some, I don't want to say good teams, but Oregon State ended up being a pretty good team that year. Syracuse was a power conference team as well, and Penn State came out and really lit them up. I kind of get the sense that that's how this season will start off as well, before we obviously get into that stretch of Ohio State and Michigan. But I don't know. I think this is a really good Penn State team, and yeah, Drew is going to have some nerves going into this game for sure. But I think Penn State will be able to lean on its run game early. I think the offensive line will be hitting on cylinders. We'll get some play action to get Drew going, and yeah, it's tough to see this one going awry for Penn State. What do you have as a score prediction?
Score prediction. Now, obviously, we do our score prediction, our final score predictions the Friday before the game. But that being said, right now, I told the guys in the West Virginia show yesterday, I'm thinking something like 38-10 Penn State. Like, it's a game where I think it's close enough score at halftime, but Penn State's superior talent and depth just takes over in the second half, and they just kind of run them down, and eventually just turn into a blowout. I will say, I think West Virginia, they get a touchdown in garbage time, so that's where the 10 points comes from. So
yeah, I'm thinking something along that lines too. I don't know, for some reason 42-17 is sticking out for me. So yeah, something along those lines. But
if that includes a defensive score too, I could see that.
Yeah, maybe Drew has. I'm not even going to finish that sentence. I'm not going to say what could happen, because we're positivity here. But no, I don't think Penn State's going to have too much trouble with West Virginia, and that plus 19, or rather minus 19.5 for Penn State might be something that I look into as the game gets closer.
South Bend Hawkeye. Why does PSU get overhyped? I don't know. I don't remember them getting overhyped last year. I mean, if anything, they were kind of an afterthought last year after those 2020 and 2021 seasons. This is the most
I'll also say
them getting
at
least 6 years. I mean, you get real 2017 vibes as far as hype is concerned. But it's funny you mentioned 2008, Pat. I'm getting 1999 vibes in terms of how ferocious this defense appears on paper. I mean, sheer athleticism and talent. It's just, I mean, of course, I hope the season turns out much better than that 99 season did. I think the offense will be a lot better than that 99 offense was, especially because they play in a modern day system. I mean, back then they weren't even lining up in the shotgun. I mean, that tells you how primitive a system it was they were using. And so I digress a little bit, but yeah, I think we both agree this is going to be a blowout win in Penn State's favor. So be a nice blowout under the lights. Fun one to start the season. So bring us to our next game, which is the Delaware Blue Hens. Bunch of Michigan wannabes with those helmets. I'm kidding.
Other way around. It's Michigan wanting to be Delaware.
That's it. Michigan wanting to be like Delaware. But Delaware comes in. Delaware is probably, I think of Delaware football. First thing I think of is Joe Flacco.
I think of Pat Devlin, former Penn State.
That's probably the second thing I think of, Devlin. But they're an accomplished FCS program. But this is a game where the only thing you want to see is just no key players get injured. You want them to put this game away by halftime so the starters can all sit. But it's also, I feel like these games, I think back a couple of years ago when they hosted Villanova, and
this is
they were
exactly
struggling
what I was
to run the
on.
football against them, and it kind of raised some red flags. I think to myself, well, if they can't run the ball on Villanova, like, they're going to be in some trouble in Big Ten play if they can't get if the pass game gets stifled. And so, so that's also those those cakewalk type games. Those are where you can see maybe some some glaring issues starting to pop up that won't cost them that game, but something that could cost them down the stretch if it doesn't get cleaned up soon enough. So, I don't even know an opera score prediction. I mean, we know Penn State should win this easily. Pat, any thoughts on this one?
No, I'm glad you brought up the Nova game because that's kind of what I was thinking as well, right? Because I mean, you Penn State hater or Penn State lover, I don't think anybody's really thinking that Delaware is going to give Penn State much of a game here. But like you said, right, you go back to the Villanova game in 2021 when Penn State was coming off wins against Wisconsin, going into Madison and winning that game, and then winning a tough game against Auburn here in Beaver Stadium. And one of the overarching themes going into that Nova game was, okay, Penn State's had some trouble running the ball. Let's see if they can get it going against Villanova. And then, like you said, coming out of that game, I think they averaged like 2.5 yards per carry. And it's like, okay, this might be bad. This might end up being bad. And as it was, it really foreshadowed a big issue for Penn State not being able to run the ball the rest of the year. I even think back to last year against Central Michigan, and yeah, Central Michigan's a MAC team, but kind of still the same idea of, right, Penn State's going into that game, they're expected to win big. It's never going to really be in doubt what the end result is, but what was the process like? And against Central Michigan last year was the fact that they were playing a lot of cover zero, kind of daring Penn State to beat them deep, and Penn State was having some trouble doing that. Sean Clifford was having some trouble doing that, and that was something that again popped up. Those lack of explosive play, especially over the top in the pass game. The Penn State did get sorted out by the end of the year, right against Utah with Keandre Lambert-Smith. We saw that, but so yes, although this game is knock on wood should not be much of an issue for Penn State, it's a game that they can definitely learn a lot about themselves, especially moving forward. Because as we'll talk about here in a couple seconds, that Illinois game is probably trickier than a lot of people might think, and obviously Iowa is always going to give Penn State a bit of a battle.
Before we dive into that Illinois game, though, I just want to shout out to all 15 of you tuning in currently, and those of you commenting. Irvin Lafayette, LFG, Ed Rogers, Reigning Blue and White, Robert France, Manny C, South Bend Hawkeye, Mike 3883. Welcome. Hope you're enjoying the show. I am kind of going through and starring some of your comments because at the end of the show we will address questions and comments you may have. We always like to do a Q&A session at the end of these things. So same with post-game shows. So, and also, as you can see in the scrolling banner down below, you can join our Discord. Talk college football all the time. Go to patreon.com/MarkRogersTV. Make a donation and get access to the Discord channel. So there's my spiel. Back to the schedule. We've got Illinois on the road. As Pat, you alluded to, this it can be a much tougher game than anticipated. Actually, you asked me. You can make a case that besides Michigan and Ohio State, this may be the toughest game on the schedule for Penn State, like the third toughest game overall for Penn State, because it's at Illinois. It's a big noon kick. In Illinois, I mean, even though they've lost several key guys, including their top running back, Chase Brown, and I think Devin Witherspoon in the secondary. They've lost several guys in the secondary, but they still return Jerzon Newton and Keith Randolph Jr. on the defensive line. It's a ferocious tag team there, Bash Brothers, whatever you want to call them, but they're, they could still potentially make life miserable for that Penn State offensive line and for Drew Aller if they're not careful. So I think that's a game where Penn State better be ready to, show up and hit them in the mouth. And I would think, though, given that a lot of guys in this team were around 2 years ago when they inexplicably lost to Illinois, my hope is they will be ready to dish out some revenge. But it's going to be a tough one. I mean, this has all the makings of a game where maybe Illinois is leading early on or just back and forth. Pat, just, you want to talk real quick. What do you think? How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think you laid it out pretty well. That this is going to be, I don't want to say a classic Illinois team, because Illinois has kind of changed over the years, especially with Bielema coming in. But kind of like the idea of like what the Big Ten West did, which is kind of gross offensively, but somehow they're able to move the ball down the field and get it done, and then having a strong defense. And Illinois certainly has that. What Bielema has done at Illinois these last couple of years. And really in quick time, I think this is his third season. Yeah, 2021 was his first season. So already in his third season, having that program at the level it is, where, like you said before, that after Ohio State and Michigan, that going to Illinois might actually be their toughest game on Penn State's schedule, says a lot about the job that he's doing. I think, like we talked about earlier, when we look at Penn State and think what's going to potentially give this team issues, it's one, an offense that is able to run the ball. And whether Illinois is or isn't, we don't necessarily know right now, but they're going to be committed to it. Brett Bielema is not going to go out there and say, hey, let's pass the ball over 40 times. Let's try to pass for 400 yards. He's going to run the ball. He's going to test the interior of Penn State's defensive line and defensive unit as a whole. So we'll see how they're able to hold up. And then what they do defensively, they do lose their defense coordinator to Purdue, where he's now the head coach. But I'm sure, Aaron Henry's taking over. He's been with Bielema, played for Bielema back at Wisconsin. So certainly understands, kind of what the expectation is and what Bielema wants to do. So I don't expect that defense to drop off too much, because like you said, they're returning two terrific defenders on the interior in Keith Randolph and Newton. So yeah, it's a nerve-wracking game. And before I said how, I look at West Virginia and I think that, it's going to be pretty easy for Penn State. I think that they get out to a lead early and kind of blow them out. I have a feeling that when we hop on this post game show after Illinois, even if it's a win, it's going to be one of those like, ugh, that was not fun for 3 hours type of game. So I'll kind of let you lead off with what you're thinking score wise. I mean, again, we don't have to get too specific, but I'm kind of thinking that it's going to be a gross one. That even if Penn State wins, and I do think Penn State will win, that we're not going to be too happy as we come on here and have to talk about it.
I mean, to be honest, I would just be happy. I'll be happy they get out of there with a win. I mean, it won't be like, I mean, I expect this to be a tough game. I guess that being said, it's going to depend. I think it's going to depend on how Drew Hour's coming around by that point. That's going to be his first road game, first of all. And he's got to do it, at Illinois against, this ferocious D-line. As I said, as I was alluding to before, though, Illinois has lost quite a bit from the secondary, including Witherspoon. And although they're definitely improving recruiting-wise with Bielema at the helm, it's not like they don't strike me as a team, though, that can just simply reload.
It's not plug and play.
And I'll say this. I think I would much rather be playing this game when they're playing it in mid-September as opposed to a month later, or in November. Because by then, I think those younger guys will be getting more mature and figuring things out. I'd rather be playing them right when they're playing them, when maybe those replacements still haven't, quite gotten used to being the starters yet. And maybe we don't know how Luke Altmaier's going to turn out at quarterback. He was decent at Ole Miss, but but he does have some guys to throw. Isaiah Washington returns at receiver, and Casey Washington, who made the game-winning grab, 2-point conversion a couple of years ago, is also back. They do lose Chase Brown, though, and I mean that's not someone I don't think they can just simply reload with. I'm sure they got some capable guys, and they'll definitely try to throw them at Penn State's defense. But that early on, I'm not sure if they will be up to speed in some areas where they need to be in order to pull the upset. I think this is a game, like I said, I think it's maybe Illinois ahead early on but I think Penn State's depth just takes over in the fourth quarter. I'm thinking something like a 10 to 14 point win for Penn State. But they don't put it away until like late fourth quarter.
Yeah, I was thinking something like 28-17 maybe, and kind of the same idea as you were, Illinois,
Nice.
maybe they take like a lead into halftime, like 13-10, or I guess that wouldn't make sense if I was saying 28-17, but you know what I mean, right? That it's kind of a gross game. Drew's looking not like the savior like we think he is, and then Penn State kind of gets it together, and it's the type of game that they need. I do think that this, right, when if you look at these first 6 games, West Virginia, Delaware, at Illinois, Iowa, at Northwestern, UMass, it's not extremely daunting. I think that most teams would be pretty happy with this 6 as your opening games, because it's not super daunting, but it's also there's tests there, right? West Virginia is a power team. Going to Illinois and having to play at 11 a.m. is going to be a bit of a weird environment as well, right? Getting Iowa at home for a whiteout game is going to be interesting. So it's certainly going to test the team. We're going to see what they have, and like you said before, Drew is going to have to come out into that atmosphere, and he's at some point going to have to respond to probably something negative that he inflicted upon himself. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think Penn State does win. But like I said, I have a feeling that's going to be one of those games that's not going to be all that satisfying at the end. But a win is a win. So we'll see what happens.
Precisely. And they follow that Illinois game up with a game against another team known for their defense in the Iowa Hawkeyes. This one at least will be in the friendly confines of the Beeve, and it's the annual whiteout game. CBS has that one at 7:30 p.m. And, just so many storylines with this one, Pat. Obviously, there was some bad blood from 2 years ago when, Iowa fans kept booing Penn State's injured players, thinking they were just trying to slow the offense down for Iowa, which is pretty laughable thing when you say it out loud.
Tim, I don't know about you, but when you can have PJ Musafir tear his ACL just so you slow the game down, you can't pass that opportunity up. When you can tell Juwan Brisker and Arnold Ebiketie, 2 NFL players, hey, just sit out for a couple plays so we can get you off the field. You do that. You do that so you can put a walk on in at defensive end instead of Arnold Ebiketie. But no, continue. I just want to toss that in there. That blood.
And of course, you let Sean Clifford get injured when you're up 14-3 and about to go 21-3 just to toy with the Hawkeyes, trying to slow them down. Yeah, but that was just as a game. I remember Marty saying this, like, if Cliff doesn't go down in that game, Penn State just boat races the Hawkeyes. They had that secondary figured out, and Cliff was exploited. And this is also why now, why Franklin and staff have made sure they've got a solid backup ready to go, and that would be Bo Pribula. In case something happens to Drew in this game, I have enough confidence that Bo will be able to take the reins of the offense and be at least serviceable enough to move the chains. Unlike
not to go too far off on a tangent, but I do want to say that I do like the idea that Bo is such a different player from Drew that, if say that again, knock on wood, say Drew gets injured against like UMass going to that Ohio State game, Ohio State will be able to game plan for Bo, knowing that he's going to be more of a runner. But if Drew, for whatever reason, say he loses a contact or he gets an upset tummy and has to go to the bathroom during a game, and Penn State needs Bo to come in for a series or two, the fact that he's going to be, not that Drew's a bad runner, but that Bo, is a legit athlete. Some would say Trace McSorley-esque. I'm not saying that because I have too much reverence for Trace, but, some would say Trace McSorley-esque. I like the idea of him kind of giving a different dynamic and kind of, taking a defense for surprise, especially if it's going to be in the middle of the game. So just wanted to point that out real quick, not to cut you off.
Right. And of course, because I different skill sets, so it's not like teams can easily prepare for a situation where Bo comes in, whether it's by design or just because Drew can't go in for whatever reason.
Tummy aches.
So we have a nice little. Actually, South Bend Hawk has been trolling us in the comments for a little while, but I had to throw this up here. Kid go 2-0 at Penn State. Third. We'll see, but my prediction is not likely. I mean, it's going to be a tough game because of that Iowa defense. And, McNamara is an upgraded quarterback over Spencer Petras. But I mean, who are Iowa's skill players that really jump out and scare you here? I mean, it's like K McNamara and what Army, you know?
Yeah, I definitely think that Cade's a legit quarterback. I think that he was a little bit of a byproduct of what Michigan's offense was able to carry on a bit, but he made throws when he needed to in 2021. Eric All, the same Michigan tight end that ran past Kalen King and everybody on Penn State's defense, is also in Iowa. So that does concern me a little bit. I think Iowa's offense probably won't be as pathetic as we've seen. I do think McNamara is going to be a bit of a step up, like you said, from Spencer Petras. But let me just check something real quick. Yes, Brian Ferentz is still the offense coordinator at Iowa, so it's tough for me to actually be scared. And I realize that I say this, Iowa has won in 2021 against Penn State, and they won in the 2020 season. That actually didn't happen. But so, well, I guess I can't make too many jokes at Iowa's expense. But I think James Franklin is a very petty individual, like we saw in 2016 against Michigan State with D'Antonio. So we'll see what happens with Iowa if Penn State's able to get up big. I'm not necessarily expecting a blowout just because I think Iowa, like you said, good defense will keep things close, try to bleed the clock offensively, run the ball, ball control, battle of field position, things like that. But I do expect Penn State to have a bit of a comfortable victory. Are you thinking the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a score. I would think something. I would think something like a 10 to 17 point win. It's not going to be a blowout, but I just think, with that whiteout crowd, with that defense, and I think the offense is going to make some magic happen too. I think, and of course the whole revenge factor and all that. I mean, this just feels like a game like Penn State's like they're not going to lose this unless something goes catastrophically wrong, which, as we saw 2 years ago, it could go catastrophically wrong. So I won't rule it out, but that's what it would take for Iowa to win this game.
Perhaps rightly or wrongly, and I don't want to speak for Tim, but as Penn State fans, it's tough for us to sit here and think about a whiteout game where Ohio State nor Michigan are coming in and Penn State's playing a Big Ten opponent, and for Penn State fans to expect to lose that game. Obviously, I think the whiteout, when you look at the record, it's not as good as, many people would necessarily think off the top of their head, but that's just because Penn State's usually an underdog in whiteout games because they usually are hosting Ohio State or hosting Michigan, which tends to have better teams than Penn State. I don't think it's going to be the case with Iowa. So not to speak for Tim, but I think that we're thinking that it's tough for you to say, hey, Penn State is having a whiteout game against not Ohio State or Michigan. Do you think that they're going to lose, and for us to expect that to happen?
Oh yes, I did forget about Eric All, the former Michigan.
Eric All is legit. I agree. It's played the expectation. I like Eric All a lot.
Someone mentioned they brought in a former Ohio State receiver, so maybe he could be good too. Don't know who someone mentioned their running back. Not sure who that is, but we'll find out. But should be another good whiteout game though to watch. So that brings us now to the end of September and road trip to Northwestern. Even before all that crap hit the fan at Northwestern a month ago, this was a game that, I thought would be hands down the easiest road game on Penn State's schedule. And of course, that's what's happened since then has only solidified those thoughts even further. It's a team they were just devoid of talent to begin with, or not only have talent in a few studs in certain areas. But other than that, it's just not the kind of Northwestern teams that Pat Fitzgerald had been fielding in previous years. And it just kind of felt like a program that was declining and really, you weren't sure whether it was going to get back up. They were probably, again, I wasn't even thinking this year they would get back to 500, but that's certainly not going to happen now with the chaos going on there. Although I I think David Braun's carried himself well. I can see him as a guy who kind of rallies the troops. At least, I'm sure the players are taking a liking to him. But we'll see. Actually, one thing it's made that Northwestern Rutgers game actually kind of intriguing for me now to see how they come out in that one. Because of course, Rutgers isn't supposed to be good either, but they're not the team that's in turmoil right now. So, but by that point, they'll probably played 4 or 5 games, and who knows if they get off to a disastrous start, maybe they'll already, they may already be mailing it in at that point. Who knows? Either way, I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, I expect Penn State to, whatever the spread ends up being here, I would expect them to cover it without too much difficulty.
Yeah, Northwestern's always tough with knowing like whether they're actually going to be good or bad. And I know Pat Fitzgerald isn't there anymore, but that was like kind of his MO, where it's like West Virginia win 9 games. If only season they would only win 3, and then they would win 7, and then they would only win 4. I feel like it was a lot of up and down for Fitzgerald at times, where if they came in with expectations, they wouldn't be as good as expected, or if they came in with low expectations, they would be better. So I'm curious to see if that kind of happens with Braun there as the interim head coach. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think Northwestern will be as bad as people are saying. That's not to say that I expect them to make a bowl game or anything, but I don't know if they're going to be like truly pathetic as far as Big Ten teams go. I'm not expecting much of a difficult game for Penn State, but going to Evanston, playing at Ryan Fields, I'm sure half the stands will be Penn State fans, half the stands will be probably empty. So it's always just like a weird atmosphere, weird environment there. So kind of expect like a sleepy, slow start for Penn State, kind of like what we saw in 2017 with Trace and Saquon on those guys. So kind of expect them the same. Maybe they win like, I don't know, 31-7 or something along those lines. But yeah, you just hope for a good weather game. I feel like Northwestern, even last year, obviously when they came to Penn State, it was a rain out. When Ohio State went to Northwestern, there was like 60-mile-per-hour winds that really made things fun for CJ Stroud and company. So, being up there in Illinois by the lakes, you just hope for good weather. But yeah, tough to look at Northwestern and be too concerned with what they're doing, what they're going through.
South Bend, I would say Northwestern's having the worst off season compared to Minnesota. Yeah. I mean, I know there's reports about how Fleck was supposedly acting, but it just sounds more like Fleck being a weirdo or something. I don't know, but obviously it hasn't blown up in Minnesota like it's blown up in Northwestern. So I would definitely say, build your Fleck bank up for positive drug tests. Look into that. But yes, so that brings us to the bye week, which, as we know, hasn't always been kind of Penn State, but I think that's well in the rearview mirror at this point, so I'm not worried about the bye week. Nice thing about the only thing about bye weeks, it seems like under Franklin, the team tends to come out kind of flat off the bye week. Maybe it's because being creatures of habit and 1-0 and all that, maybe things get thrown out of whack. But the nice thing about that is they're not playing Michigan, they're playing UMass coming out of the bye week, and I guess similar to Delaware, there's not a whole lot to say about this one besides, don't let any key people get hurt. Put this game away at halftime. I guess it's also a game where maybe you can find out, kind of like I said with Delaware, maybe you'll see early on, it could be some red flags as far as, what's a weak spot in this team. Maybe this is a game where perhaps you see green flags that, for some of those red flag areas that they've cleaned them up by this point, because you're getting to about mid-season here. And this is, of course, the week before Ohio State. I mean, really, Northwestern, no disrespect, Northwestern, the bye week, UMass, it's almost like you're getting like 3 weeks to get ready for that showdown in Columbus.
Like a preseason.
Yeah, like a preseason in season.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Tim. I don't know anything about UMass other than that their coach is Don Brown, who of course was defensive coordinator under Jim Harbaugh at Michigan all those years. So I'm led to believe that he will probably have his normal creative defenses with exotic blitzes and things like that to give Drew some good looks and to try to confuse him. So yeah, like we were saying about Delaware, this is a game where you can hopefully learn a little bit about the team, see how they respond to certain situations, and probably some uniqueness that UMass will bring. But this was a 1-11 team last year that very well might be one of the worst or the worst Power Five or Division One program in the country. So once again, tough to see Penn State having too much of a problem there. You just hope that injuries and things like that don't happen, and that like you said, the red flags that maybe we see against Delaware, Illinois, or Iowa, or Northwestern are starting to become cleaned up as they come off that bye week and as they head into one of the most important games on their schedule, that's Ohio State. So I don't think we need to do a score prediction for UMass. The one by a lot.
No. Yeah,
unless you have any other.
Nothing. I mean, I don't know what the spread's going to be, but maybe that'll be the most interesting part of the game. Can they cover what could be an astronomically high spread? So I don't know. I'm not really a degenerate, so I don't know if I can answer that one, but yeah, we do have some people at VSD though that are and could help us out with that. But moving on to a game that we've all got circled, this showdown in Columbus at Ohio State, October 21st. They haven't set a time for this yet, but if I'm a betting man, this is probably going to be a big noon game on Fox.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It doesn't end up being big noon. But you read about Ohio State. Obviously, just like Penn State, they're bringing in a new quarterback. We don't know if it's going to be Kyle McCord or Devin Brown yet. Maybe got some Buckeyes watching this right now who could fill us in. But it seems like it's a battle between those two. Supposedly, the offensive lines got some issues, more so than in years past. And of course, we don't know how there's parts in the defense that need to be shored up, namely the secondary. We all know how much potential a D-line has because we saw JT Tuimoloau be a one-man wrecking crew in the fourth quarter last year as he just ate Sean Clifford alive for that. And but it kind of feels like, if there's going to be a year where Penn State beats the Buckeyes in Columbus, maybe this is the year. What do you think, Pat?
I agree. Ohio State's obviously more talented than Penn State. I don't want to act like that Penn State and Ohio State are necessarily on level playing fields as far as recruiting talent goes.
They recruit at a different level than the rest of the Big Ten.
But I do think that one of the but I do think that when you look at where Penn State has probably one of its greatest strengths, which is that defensive end with Adisa Isaac and Dennis Sutton and Chop Robinson and Amin Manover and Zariah Fisher, and where you look at where Ohio State has some issues, like you were saying, on the offensive line, where they're really had to go after people in the transfer portal that may or may not even be starting for them, may end up just being depth pieces, and kind of some of the misses that they've had at offensive tackle, and the fact that they're replacing DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson, two really good offensive tackles. That's a spot where Penn State could have a really, really big advantage, which, us being Penn State fans back in 2014, 15, and that time span, we know what some shakiness on the offensive line can mean. I mean, we even saw last year for Penn State against Ohio State with some of Bryce Effner's struggles at right tackle. So you hope that that's an area where Penn State can really exploit the Buckeyes and have one of those advantages, because if your defensive ends can win their one-on-one battles against offensive tackles, it should change the dynamic of the game. Like you said, I mean, if it's going to happen, it's like this kind of needs to be the year. Obviously, you don't ever, as Penn State fans, I don't think that we think that Penn State's going to go into the horseshoe is necessarily expecting to win. I unfortunately did think that back in 2017 and had my heart ripped out. So I will make sure not to make that mistake again. But no, I mean, it feels like if Penn State's going to do it, it should be this season. Ohio State's always going to be a good team, right? If Penn State's waiting for the time that Ohio State drops down, I don't know if that's ever going to come. But breaking in a new quarterback, you do get them. I mean, it is towards the end of October, so it's not exactly earlier in the season, but it's not, later in November or something along those lines. Breaking in a new quarterback, having some questions on the offensive line. Ryan Day, maybe, I mean, he's still recruiting well, but maybe not at the point where he was when his tenure started. Maybe their depth isn't as good. We'll see, but they're Ohio State, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. could flat out just win the game by himself. Travion Henderson at running back could flat out win the game by himself. What they have on the defensive line, very talented defensive ends and defensive tackles. And as good as Penn State's offensive line is, you just never know. And having to go into the horseshoe, it's gonna be a tough one. So I don't, I know we were talking about the schedule and like, do we think it's a win? Do we think it's not? I think Penn State has a good chance. On the spectrum of can they beat Ohio State, but you never feel too confident. Ohio State's going to be a really good team. I know that's not exactly breaking news or shocking news, but Ohio State's going to be a good team. So we'll see what happens.
Oh, hello, Ellie. That's
Hey,
Elise, our fellow Black Shoe Diaries colleague, tuning in. Good to see you, Ellie. But yeah, I'll say this. I mean, even though I think this may be one of their better chances in years to beat the Buckeyes, I'd say those back-to-back 1-point losses in 2017, 2018 when they blew double-digit fourth quarter leads, it put me back in I'll believe it when I see it mode. So I would be inclined to pick Ohio State to win in this instance. But again, would not shock me if Penn State did get out of Columbus with the dub. This may be the year to do it. So that brings us now to the end of October, where they welcome the Indiana Hoosiers back at Beaver Stadium. Obviously, this is an Indiana program that there's any team that really took advantage of the COVID year, it was them. Obviously winning that. Obviously, it was the opening game where Michael Penix came up short on his 2-point conversion. And
you keep saying this 2020 season like it happened, Tim. I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's right. Yeah.
Nothing ever happens. Michael Penix could not score because there was no game.
But since that COVID season, though, they've really just fallen off a cliff. They went 2-10 in 2021. They went 3-9 last year. This year, I think the over-under I saw was 3.5 wins, which sounds about right. They did dive deep into the pool to get some guys, including former blue chip quarterback from Tennessee, Taven Jackson, who will presumably be their starter. But this isn't a team that's, they've always been kind of one-dimensional offensively. I feel like they always have a good pass game, and usually their quarterback can be mobile sometimes, but they don't have anyone in the running game who really scares you. And so if you can just kind of pin your ears back and just get some pressure on the quarterback and, just let your secondary do the rest of the work. I mean, it's a team you can dispatch rather easily. And frankly, you think about last year, this is the other thing with Indiana, just lack of depth. They have some solid players as starters, but if they go down, there's a big drop off between them and the backups. And you saw that with quarterback last year when they knocked out, I think it was Jack Tuttle, who was their starter.
Yeah,
they knocked him out, and then for the next guy, it was Brendan Sorsby his name, but you could definitely tell there was a big drop off, and Manny Diaz smelled blood in the water once that was the case, and it was all over for them. But the other thing is too, the defense, which is supposed to be Tom Allen's calling card. They didn't exactly look like some of the Indiana defenses he's fielded earlier in his head coaching career there, and you have to wonder how much better it's going to be this year. And I don't know if it's going to matter, Frank, because I think this Penn State offense is going to be able to run all over them like they did last year. And I'm sure by this point, hopefully Drew Allar's pretty comfortable and as a starter and, is slinging it across the yard. I guess, this is a long-winded way of saying I'm not concerned about this game. I think Penn State wins this one comfortably.
Yeah, other than it being a letdown off of Ohio State, right? Whether that's a win or a loss in the horseshoe, I think as we've seen, Penn State has sometimes, especially with losses, has let one loss bleed into another. But yeah, I mean, Indiana, I feel some kinship considering the fact that I think Indiana football a lot like Penn State basketball, where it's like, they're lovable. They kind of, sometimes they're probably better than people think. They're scrappy, blah, blah, blah. Tom Allen stinks. He always has stunk. He got lucky with that 2020 season. I just hope this is, don't clip this if Penn State loses in Indiana. I'll look really dumb. But yeah, I mean, he had a good 2019 season. They did follow up. Maybe that 2020 team would have been pretty good because Michael Penix was healthy for them at that point. And we did see last year for Washington what Michael Penix could do, and when Indiana had Kellen DeBoer back in the day, how good he is of an offensive coach. But yeah, it's been struggle bus for Indiana these last 2 years. I know they have been battling some injuries and things like that at quarterback, but they're just in a tough spot in the Big Ten East where you do wonder what type of program they could be if they were in the West, or if they were winning a little bit more and could maybe get a little bit more consistent fan support if they were in the West and maybe winning the West every once in a while, because I think they are not too far off from what we see from a lot of Western teams that have made the Big Ten championship game. But in the East, they're kind of stuck as a bottom team, and I don't really know if Allen's going to be able to right the ship there. This is going to year 8 or 9 for him, and it's tough to see him fall off like this to then be able to pick it back up. So, not too concerned with Indiana, and unless it's a letdown game. I think Penn State wins pretty easily.
Agreed. So this takes us now into the November portion of the slate, which starts off with a trip to Beaver Stadium East, otherwise known as Maryland. I say that because I've been to some Penn State Maryland games at College Park, and usually half the stadium's Penn State fans. So I expect this year to be no different. This is a team, Maryland's a team that you see them give the other big dogs in the conference like Ohio State and Michigan a difficult time, but the exception of a couple of years in recent times, Penn State's just, taking them to the woodshed. I mean, of course, last year shut them out 30-0. I mean, Talia Tagovailoa looked ready to get back on the bus after the first drive where he got ended with him getting sacked near the end zone. Penn State just killed them in the trenches on both sides. And so Maryland they got some skill players. Obviously, they returned Talia, a quarterback. Roman Hemby, their running back's pretty good. I'm sure they got some. I'm sure they returned a receiver. I think Deshaun Jones might be back, or
West Virginia, Caden Prather transferred there.
Penn State. That's what I was thinking. They always grab one or two guys from the portal who are pretty good. So yes, Caden Prather could be that guy for them this year. Problem is though, in the trenches, they're going to need to get a lot better if they want to, break away from their 7 to 8 win ceiling as a program, and also take down, Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan on a more regular basis. This is a game where maybe it'll be closer than last year. I will say Maryland will probably get some points in this one. So, but I think it's a game where, again, Penn State, I think they're still too strong in the trenches for Maryland. And, I think that defense can hold them in check. I remember a couple of years ago, like when, Penn State went there, and that was a close game. I mean, that wasn't put away until the last few minutes when Jair Brown had a pick 6 as Maryland was driving to try to whittle a 10-point game down to a 7 or a 3-point game. But even in that game, I mean, they were picking up some, and this was Brent Price. This wasn't Manny Diaz. I mean, even in that game, I mean, they were getting some pretty timely turnovers. They didn't allow Maryland to look like that in that 2020 game, which of course never happened according to Pat.
And
But
you keep bringing this 2020 thing up, and I continue to tell you it didn't happen, Tim. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know if you didn't listen to Marty either, but I'm telling you, 2020 never happened.
yeah, and so I think this is a game. Penn State should end up winning. I don't know what the spread is going to be, but I would definitely take Penn State to cover it, whatever it ends up being. Pat, your thoughts?
I like Maryland this year. I like Talia. I know he did struggle against Penn State last year, but I mean he's your classic like pretty good college quarterback where he can go out and like we saw against Penn State in this fake 2020 season. Hypothetically, if it happened, he hypothetically might have had a good game. So I think he's a good player, especially coming back, a year older as a quarterback. I think that really does mean a lot. I like their skill position guys, like you mentioned, the West Virginia kid, Caden Prather. So as much as Penn State fans do like to make fun of Mike Locksley, I think it was a good hire for Maryland, which I think was a little bit surprising given some of his struggles when he was at New Mexico back in the day. Of course, he did go back to the Saban School of Coaching and kind of righted the wrongs there. But I do think this will be one of the weirder games that Penn State will have. It feels like, Maryland's 2 wins against Penn State were both in State College, of course, in 2014, and then in this fake 2020 season that never happened. So Penn State does generally play pretty well when they're in College Park. I know you mentioned that last game was a little bit closer than the 31-14 score indicated, but I mean before that, Penn State was at 59-0 and 66-3. So it does feel like Maryland is due for at least one of these games to be pretty close in College Park, where they can kind of get their crowd going. And we'll see what time this game kicks off at. Do we know what the Big Ten is doing with the kickoffs this year as far as like November? Like if they're doing 7:30 kicks? I thought I saw that Ohio State might be having a 7:30 kick in November. So I don't know if that rule has been changed or not. But this feels like that type of game that it's like, oh, we're just going to put this on the Big Ten Network for 8 p.m. so Maryland fans can get like a blackout or something like that. So that would be something that could potentially scare them.
I'm not sure what the rules are going to be for night games in the Big Ten. I mean, obviously NBC, I think there was some deal between them and Kevin Warren when the previous Big Ten director, whatever the title is, Big Ten president. So I think there was something, and I know Ohio State administration wasn't happy about it, but apparently Ohio State had agreed to like a 7:30 game with Michigan State in mid-November. So I mean,
I guess with NBC, sorry not to cut you off. I guess you're right with NBC having this. Yeah, I would guess. Yeah, if you're gonna have all these contracts with NBC and CBS and Fox, just flat out, there's gonna have to be a 7:30 kick in the Big Ten going into November. I don't know if this will be that NBC game, but it just feels like one of those where it's like, oh yeah, Maryland will give you like how Penn State will sometimes get like how we have that like a random like 8 o'clock game against like Georgia State or Buffalo. Like sometimes they just toss something on FS1 or the Big Ten Network. So I can see that.
Possible, I guess. I won't rule it out, but I mean, we don't know. Obviously, we don't know what we don't know exactly what Penn State's record's going to be at that point, or just how they're going to, or what their position is going to be in the Big Ten title race, Big Ten East title race at that point, or how Maryland's season's going. Maybe I would guess like a 3:30 kick. That's usually what this ends up being this time of
Maryland's going to be a good team, though. Maryland, I think.
Overall, they should be pretty deep. But, again, like they need to get a lot better in the trenches, though, if they're going to, be, challenged for a Big Ten East title good. Like, they're definitely like 7, 8, go to bowl games every year good, which, for them, I mean, that's good. That's not something to take for granted. I mean, I'll give credit where it's due to Mike Locksley. I wasn't sure, just knowing how disastrous his tenure at New Mexico was, whether he would be able to, have any consistent success in Maryland. But it's been working out for him lately.
So. Also dangerous, look ahead spot for Penn State, whether they have one loss or whether, knock on wood, that they're undefeated and, that you're getting Michigan coming to Beaver Stadium for that next weekend, which if let's talk about like the most optimistic worlds where Penn State's undefeated going into that Maryland game, and you see Michigan maybe also undefeated too. That'd be one of the biggest games in Beaver Stadium. I mean, when was the last time Beaver Stadium hosted a game with an undefeated Penn State against another undefeated team in November? It's been a long, long time. So that would just be one of the things that would worry you, that you're going into a game against a rival of sorts. Obviously, Maryland, Penn State, that term rival, it gets it's a little messy, but yeah, it's a worrisome game as far as the games that we've been talking about, like Indiana and UMass and Northwestern. I think Maryland is certainly a level above those teams. But let's get into Michigan, because that's kind of
yes. Speaking of two teams being undefeated at Beaver Stadium in November, potential scenario when Michigan comes to town. Of course, that would require Penn State having to beat Ohio State for the first time in 7 years, but it's on the table. And I've seen a lot of Michigan fans chirping the comments, and you got Ohio State people stepping in saying Penn State's going to destroy them. You got Michigan fans saying, someone's mentioned something about how they ran for 417 yards last year and don't see them patching it up in 1 year. Or, if Penn State wins, it's going to be very close. That last comment I would tend to agree with. If Penn State does win, I think it's going to be a very close game, regardless who wins. I feel confident predicting Michigan's not going to run for over 400 yards again. If there's anything, if Manny Diaz has any game circled on this calendar, it is this game. I'm sure it still sticks in his craw to this day that the defense just, got run all over in that one. And, we'll see. That's going to be a very interesting trenches battle to watch. How does that Penn State D-line hold up? Are they able to, get at least patch up some holes and not allow Michigan to part the Red Sea like they did last year? It's going to be very interesting. And of course, that's not to take away from JJ McCarthy at quarterback, and they got a couple of guys at receiver, Cornelius Johnson and Roman Wilson. And so they've, this will be a big challenge. Michigan, just like Penn State, tons of hype. And, they've actually proven on the field the last couple of years, winning the Big Ten title, getting to the playoffs. So no doubt then this year they're talking about trying to win a national title. So there's going to be a lot riding for Michigan in this one. And, we'll see. It's going to be a very tight game, but man, I don't know about you, Pat. I guess my thinking was Penn State was going to get a split this year between Ohio State and Michigan. Since I'm predicting a loss at Ohio State, I'm going to say Penn State ekes out a tight win over Michigan at the Beeve.
It's tough. I think if you're Penn State, though, right, you would rather – I guess, who do you think is actually better? Would you rather switch this around and go to Michigan, or would you rather go to Ohio State, like how it is? Because in my mind, I kind of like how the schedule breaks out. I'd rather
go to Ohio State. It just seems like, with the exception of that, that year never happened, but Penn State always gets destroyed in Ann Arbor, it seems. Usually gets destroyed in Ann Arbor. So
that's everything I'm talking about with 2020. The fact that Penn State, hypothetically, it never happened, but they go into the big house and win very easy. If that doesn't show that 2020 has no bearing on anything that's ever happened in the world, then there's nothing else that needs to. As far as trends go, right? So Penn State loses. They get blown out last year, 41-17. Of course, it has bearings on what you think is going to happen in the next game. That's generally a pretty good thing to rely on, right? If a team continually wins, right? Penn State almost always beats Indiana. Penn State almost always beats Rutgers. They're probably going to win again. What we've seen, though, is that Penn State and James Franklin in particular is able to get blown out by Michigan in the Big House, and they come out and they play well in Beaver Stadium, right? Going back to 2016, Penn State loses 49-10. The following year, they beat Michigan 42-13. They then lose 42-7 in the Big House. They come back to State College next year. Penn State wins 28-21. And they were up 21-0 in that game and kind of took their foot off the pedal and kind of just
that was a
sat on
pretty
Michigan.
And, to say the least.
Yeah, it was a tough one. Penn State did, of course, come away with the victory. So not greatly concerned that Penn State, gets blown out last year, how that has an effect on this coming season. But right, Penn State's major question, I think what people have a lot of questions outside of Drew. I would say Drew is probably the biggest, what if or what ends up happening is how they are able to hold up against the run, just given what happened against Michigan last year, right? Giving up 400 yards. And this is a good Michigan team. The offensive line is always going to be good under Jim Harbaugh, right? He instills that confidence in that unit, and Sharon Moore, Michigan's offensive line coach, does a great job as well. Or I believe he's the offensive coordinator. Either way, he does a really good job with their power run game and kind of instituting those types of things. They have talent, right? At running back, you have that dynamic duo, some good wide receivers, strong defense as always for Michigan. So it's gonna be a tough one. You just hope that Penn State's in a position where they're either at one loss or they're obviously would love to be undefeated, but even if they're at one loss, and you hope that Penn State is going to come up with the confidence, not only the team but the fan base too, because I think I think the fan base can be a little bit spooked by what happened at Michigan last year and how it seems like this team was able to completely manhandle Penn State and run over them. November 11th is a long ways away, though. It's right. It's tough to say now how much can change over that time span. So as far as score predictions go, I kind of do agree, and I know a lot of even national guys have been saying, just as you just said, that it seems like Penn State, if they're ever going to split Ohio State, Michigan, and go 11-1 and have one of those types of seasons, because that has never happened, where Penn State has only one loss and it was to one of Ohio State or Michigan, that this will be the year, at least under Franklin. So I kind of agree with that. It's I mean, maybe that's the optimistic side of me. You just hope that they win one of those two games. Which one it is, I don't know. I do. That's the tough part, right? It's tough to say that I think they're going to go into Ohio Stadium and win, but then lose to Michigan at home. But it does feel like that these top three teams in the East are that close, where we might see a situation of Ohio State beat Michigan, Michigan beats Penn State beats Ohio State, or right, however it all works out, that they all kind of beat up on each other and we end up with 3 11-1 teams. But yeah, Michigan's definitely the scariest game in my opinion on the schedule. I'm definitely more worried about what will happen for Penn State than going into that game than I probably even am going into the Horseshoe and going at Ohio State.
Yes, Mike, thanks for hit the like. Yes. If you like what you see here, we're trying to grow the SG1 Big Ten channel. So please hit the like and subscribe button there if you've enjoyed what you've seen here tonight. We'll be doing this all season long after every Penn State game this year on the SG1 Big Ten channel. And also have other shows from Iowa, Ohio State, other Big Ten, Michigan, other Big Ten teams that do this. So check us out on that, like and subscribe. Thanks for the reminder, Mike. And so yeah, I think we've talked about Michigan. That's going to be another game, pivotal game that just determines, is this going to be a special year or just another good year, but nothing spectacular. But that brings us into Rutgers, which will be senior day, home finale. I don't have a whole lot to say about this one, Pat. I guess except, Kirk Shiraka is going to make another visit to his old stomping grounds for the second year in a row. This time as Rutgers offensive coordinator. That's right. Kirk Shiraka is their coordinator now. I don't know if you saw that bit of news, but so definitely a different dynamic. They're running they're trying to run more of like I think spread or sort of high, more of an up tempo kind of offense. There's Sean Gleason beforehand. So I think, Shiraka they're kind of more about staying on schedule, controlling the clock, longer possessions. So maybe a different looking offense, but it won't matter nonetheless because just the talent and depth levels between the two schools are just It's just this wide. I just keep thinking back to 2 years ago when it seemed like half of Penn State starters came down with the flu. And if there was going to be a year Rutgers is going to beat Penn State, like that probably should have been the year. But even then, Penn State still shut them out 28-0. I mean, that, in Christian Veer's first and only real game, like playing as well as a starter, but he played most of the game. But I keep thinking back to that. That just illustrated just how wide the gap is in talent. And I just don't see how this ends any differently. Maybe it's just maybe Penn State has a slow start, sleepy start at home, but they'll eventually pull away and win pretty comfortably. I would take them to cover whatever, the spread ends up being.
Yeah, it's tough to see, a program like Rutgers or, any great school or program that we would say is in like a football school when they just have so many struggles at quarterback. It just seems like they can never really just find the guy. That it's always when Penn State has gone to play Rutgers, it seems like they're rotating in a guy or two, and that may or may not be the case this year again with Gavin Wimsatt and Evan Simon. I know last season I think they played Simon a little bit against Penn State. I know Wimsatt struggled a little bit, but I think Kirk Ciarrocca's a good offense coordinator, right? He had a tough situation at Penn State with again the season that never happened, so it's tough for him to do well considering it never happened. But it just doesn't seem like they have the quarterback in place, and when not only do you not have an average quarterback, or quite honestly even a below average quarterback, but probably one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and you're playing Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State every single season that you're going to be, all that successful program and even, getting to a bowl game every other season. So long-winded way of saying that, yeah, I don't expect too many issues with Rutgers, per usual for Penn State. How that game goes, again, November 18th is so far away, and I think how the rest of the season goes, right? If Penn State's able to, pull off, the magical season and beat Ohio State and beat Michigan, or even if they're, only a one-loss team at this point and they come off beating Michigan, how their psyche is going to the Rutgers game is going to probably depend upon if they come out hot, if they come out slow, if they come out sloppy, whatever it may be. But it doesn't seem like Rutgers quite has the horses. Although I do like some of their pieces defensively. Aaron Lewis, defensive end, went to Michigan originally, was a kid that Penn State really wanted as a recruit, and even when he decided to transfer back home right after his freshman season at Michigan. So they certainly do have some players, and defensively, Graciano will always have, a competent squad. But yeah, it's tough to see Penn State having too much issues with the Scarlet Knights in 2023.
Yeah, and you said it. I think trying to predict November games is it's basically like us throwing darts at a wall. It's obviously you can get a better idea maybe how September games could go.
Yeah.
But November, thing is at that point,
injuries even too, right? Who knows? Yeah.
Injuries happen. Guys who weren't people were kind of sleeping on step up. It could be for either team, but you got guys who step up that people weren't thinking would do so early on. And so it's just a different dynamic when we reach November. But that being said, I think we're pretty confident this should be a fairly easy win for Penn State. So that leads us to the season finale in it's at Ford Field in Detroit, Michigan, home of the Detroit Lions. Yes, this was it's funny. I met a guy I've been following on Twitter for a long time, but he's a friend of one of my high school buddies who now lives down in Austin, Texas. But he's a Michigan State grad. I met him at my high school friend's bachelor weekend a couple months ago, so I just finally meet him. But I remember just how pissed off he was about Michigan State moving this game from East Lansing to Ford Field, because it takes away a significant potential advantage for the Sparty in terms of the weather. It seems like the last few games Penn State's played there, say 2 years ago, it was like a blizzard practically. And 2019, it was pouring rain. 2017, the infamous, thunderstorm that caused a 3.5 hour delay and really threw things out of whack, which Penn State in the blue. So usually there's some crazy weather related stuff that seems to happen when Penn State goes to East Lansing. So, of course, I'm not going to complain when they move it to a dome stadium in Detroit that time of year. I think it works very well to Penn State's advantage. And, we're going, I just see Penn State, they could potentially boat race in this one, especially if Michigan State is struggling like they were this time last year. And I don't know, things don't look promising for them at the moment. That could change, but you lost Peyton Thorne to Auburn. They lost their top receiver, Keon Coleman, to the transfer portal. I forget where he transferred to.
Florida State.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your top running back return is Jalen Berger, who, no one's going to mistake him for Kenneth Walker, put it that way. Unless Mel Tucker's found a couple more Kenneth Walkers from the portal, could be an ugly year for Sparty. They could find themselves battling Indiana and Rutgers to stay out of the Big Ten East basement. So who knows where they'll be at this point, but I feel I'm feeling a lot more confident in this one than I have, like, at least in Penn State covering, I feel more confident than I would have if this game were being played in East Lansing instead.
Yeah, I basically agree with what you're saying. It seems like, Mel Tucker really hit lightning in a bottle in that 2021 season and kind of put them in a weird spot where they ended up becoming like this team, this program that like doesn't focus all that heavily on high school football recruiting. Instead, it was just like, oh yeah, we'll just build through the portal. And it turns out that that's really, really tough to do, to hit every single off season. And even when we say off season, the transfer portal, it's open for like 3 or 4 weeks, or like the heavy portion of it is only a couple weeks, and it's complete madness. It's tough to really build a rapport and to build a team out that way. And I think we saw it last year with Mel Tucker and Michigan State, and again we're going to see it this coming season because they did bring in some more guys in the transfer portal, and they unfortunately also lost a lot of people in the transfer portal too, just like you mentioned with losing Peyton Thorne. I believe it was after spring practice, wasn't that? Or at least it was during. It wasn't like immediately after the season that he left, so it kind of put them in a weird spot where they themselves weren't even able to go
it was
into
after
the
spring practice
and find someone. Yeah, so it was later in the year, so they weren't even able to, look around for themselves and find another starting quarterback. Yeah, they're just in a tough spot. I do like some of their players defensively. Cal Holiday was a Pennsylvania kid, good middle linebacker for them. Jacoby Windman. Jacoby Windman was a good player. Somebody that Penn State wanted as well. So they certainly do have, a couple dudes defensively, but yeah, it just seems like that they don't quite have, depth, and certainly right now, we'll see what Noah Kim's able to do at quarterback. I know during some mop-up duty he's looked pretty good, but I don't know if it was Sparty's idea that they'd be going into the season with Noah Kim being the guy. So, like we've been saying about all these November matchups, though, right? Noah Kim might come out, he might be really, really good, and all of a sudden, come November 24th, that Michigan State game is looking a little bit different than it does right now. But yeah, it being moved to Ford Field is a big come up. I also have, not to make it all about me, but I have a wedding that Saturday, so I was beyond blessed to be able to see that they coming up to Friday, so I will not have to miss it. So thank you to the powers that be for that, for them to move it to Black Friday and for it to move to Ford Field as well. So yeah, I think Penn State's going to be favored in that one more likely than not, and certainly at this point for us looking at that game, it's a game that Penn State should win. And as one of our commenters just mentioned, that Mel Tucker contract not looking the best right now. But.
No, not exactly. I hope he's sending a part of his paycheck every month to Kenneth Walker.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he's very lucky. He's very lucky to hit on Kenneth Walker.
So yeah, but yeah, so that brings us, of course, Big Ten championship game. Will Penn State playing it? Who knows? Of course, most of the pundits aren't predicting as such, but there's always, I've kind of noticed all these projections. They usually have Michigan or Ohio State winning the Big Ten East, but a lot of them kind of put an asterisk saying like, look out for Penn State. They're potential target. So they could, if they could potentially be playing some extra football going into December in Lucas Oil Stadium. We'll see. I said I have them going 11-1 on the year, getting that split between Ohio State and Michigan. Will that be enough to get them to win the Big Ten East? It's kind of dependent on how Ohio State and Michigan fare, against and Ohio State's got some tough games too. Just like Penn State's got a couple September tests of Illinois and Iowa. Ohio State's got to go on the road to Notre Dame. I think it's the same night actually that Iowa goes to Happy Valley. So, and Notre Dame's that's gonna, they should be an improved team from last year. That's gonna be a very difficult game for the Buckeyes. So, we'll see. It would not surprise me though, Pat, if Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State are all 11-1, and all their losses are to each other, and then we get some crazy tiebreaker scenario to determine who goes to Indy.
Yeah, that seems to be the trendy pick. I know. I was listening to the Solid Verbal. I believe I actually don't know if it was Ty or Dan, if they were saying 11-1. I know the Cover 3 guys. I heard 11-1 as well from some of their guys. Just looking around, on 3 and 24/7 and the other Penn State blogs around the interwebs, it does seem like 11-1 is kind of a popular pick because, right, everybody's saying, oh, this Penn State team, this is the best Penn State team going into the season since 2017, since 2008 or 2009 or whatever. So it's like, if you're ever going to pick for Penn State to go 11-1 and not just go with the standard, 10-2, or even in past years, I mean, I think 9-3, a lot of us were projecting, or even 8-4 last year. This is going to be the year. You can't say, oh, this is top 5 defense and Drew Zant's our quarterback, and they're like, they're going to go 10-2. But we'll see. I mean, they very well could go 10-2 though. Ohio State's very good, Michigan's very good, and we can't just simply overlook the fact that not until last year did Penn State just go 10-2 with their only losses coming to Michigan, Ohio State. Right? There's always been another loss, whether it was Minnesota, or whether it was Michigan State, obviously in other years, whether it was losing to Maryland, whether it was they lost to Illinois before. Allegedly, they lost to Indiana in 2020. I still am trying to confirm that, considering it didn't happen, but. Yeah, so we'll see what happens, but I'm kind of, I think I'm leaning towards 11-1. I know for us at BlackShoeDiaries.com, we're going to be getting our post up there, season predictions coming up soon. So I'm still kind of deciphering through that, but yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards 11-1, but Big Ten East is tough. Big Ten East is tough. Be nice to if we get like a one-time switch to the West for like the last season. Like let's have some fun. Just put Penn State in the West. Makes it a lot more fun, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So yeah, we'll see.
Oh, thank you, Dependent Fanatic. Appreciate the kind words. Nice. Yes.
We did say nice things about Michigan, though. So
we did. Yeah, we were very kind to Michigan, yes. Even if I projected Penn State would beat them. But BTN guys were pretty high on Penn State. Yes, I watched that episode. Yeah. They were all singing Penn State's praises. I did put the caveat they hadn't been to Ohio State and Michigan's camps yet. I think they've already done it in Ohio. Actually, I watched the Ohio State show, and they were praiseworthy of them. I think nothing beyond what you usually hear about Ohio State. I haven't seen. I don't think or maybe they have been to Michigan, but I haven't watched it yet. I'm DVRing these things, from my YouTube TV, so I'm sure it'll pop up eventually. I can see what they're saying about Michigan. But yeah, so I did star a few questions from before, so we're going to address those real quick before we go. NAC asks, what defensive unit do you think will have the best season? Pat, what do you think?
Man, I have to go defensive end. I think that's the obvious pick, just because Chop Robinson he finished with 5 sacks last season, I believe, and it felt like he probably, if he played the season over again, he probably could have had 10 sacks with how many pressures or this list of sacks that he had. Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, Denai Dennis Sutton. And even, I've mentioned this going back to January and have tweeted about it recently that Amin Vanover and Soraya Fisher, who are defensive end, number 4, number 5 for Penn State, I think could start at a whole bunch of Big Ten schools. There's just a lot of depth there, and there's also top high end talent. Chop Robinson could be a first round pick. Zadine Dennis-Sun could eventually be a first round pick. Eddie Isaac might not be the athlete that those other two guys are, but is another guy that could be an NFL player. I think Vanover and Soraya Fisher could potentially even, depending upon how their seasons go, or careers go, could eventually be NFL players as well. So I think I go defensive end, but I don't think you can go wrong for Penn State defense. I think there's a whole bunch of different options. What are you thinking, Tim? If you can't go defensive ends, let's say we take defensive end off the table.
So defense, so it's either linebackers or secondary. Is that where, or are we saying like linebackers, safeties, corners, I guess?
Yeah, I guess I would break it down DN, D tackle, linebacker, safety, quarterback, rather than like secondary linebacker, defense.
Okay, but we're taking away the defensive ends and tackles. Is that what we're doing?
Just defensive ends. You can pick D tackles.
Just defensive ends. Okay. Just defensive ends. I mean, honestly, oh man.
Linebacker.
This is tough because the linebackers I'm pretty with Abdul Carter and Curtis Jacob leading the outside. Carter. But I mean, that's secondary. I mean, Kalen King and Johnny Dixon at corner. I mean, especially, I pity the fool of a quarterback who throws at Kalen King's direction. It's unlikely to end well. Johnny Dixon's really come on to his own too.
Very solid play.
I still remember him giving up some 4th and forever touchdown pass to Michigan State in that blizzard a couple of years ago, and it should have never happened. But he's come a long way since to become a pretty reliable corner, which is why he got a starting spot locked down now from Kalen. Man, that's I guess I gotta go to the corners maybe. I mean, I don't know. It's tough though because Abdul Carter and Curtis Jacobs are a solid linebacking tandem. And speaking of linebackers, maybe I'm going a little off top, but I think remember the name Tony Rojas. He's a kid you're going to be hearing a lot by mid-season. He's currently a true freshman, but a high rated. He's a blue chip guy. He put on 26 pounds after enrolling early in the winter and hasn't lost like a bit of speed. I mean, he's probably, I'd say he's probably in the second string right now, but I don't know if he'll supplant anyone for starter, but he'll probably be that first guy off the bench at linebacker by mid-season. And he's going to be a name that everyone's hyping up, going into next off season for sure. So just had to throw it out there. Thank you, Manny. Another question from our resident troll of the night, South Bend Hawkeye. Seems Franklin plays big and tight in big games. Like he doesn't trust his own decisions. Afraid of the boys play and trust himself. Well, you do mention, yes, he's, trust is a big thing with Franklin. That being said, I think he has full trust in Mike Yurcich and Manny Diaz to run the offense and defense. And, those guys are letting, just from what I've watched, it doesn't seem like either Yurcich or Diaz is being put on some leash as far as to what they're allowed to do with their respective sides of the ball. I think Franklin's got full trust in them and full trust in those players to do their thing. So I don't think trust is going to be an issue this year.
It's tough because, I look at it and Penn State almost always plays Ohio State really well. It seems like they come out, they play with – I feel like they usually play with confidence, Ohio State. I don't think they look at Ohio State and necessarily think, oh, these guys are way above us. We can't beat them. They very rarely – I'm trying to think back, right? Last year they played them well. 2021, even they played them decently well on the road. Once again, 2020 did not happen, so we don't have any evidence of that. 2019, they played them well, even when Will Levis came in, right? Backup quarterback, and they were able to mount a bit of a comeback and make things interesting. So they almost always play them well. But I do understand the question that it does seem like that there's something kind of blocking Penn State when it comes to playing against Ohio State and when at times playing against Michigan. So yeah, that's I do get that outlook. I unfortunately don't have much of an answer, but I don't know if it's tight or if it's just, again, it's confounding. It's really confusing and tough, and even from a Penn State perspective to know, what is where does the breakthrough come from, right? It's easy to say that you recruit well, players play on the field, but there's so much more that goes into it than just simply the talent and X's and O's. It's the mentality and things like that. And I do wonder if, people make fun of like the 1-0 mantra, but like, is that the right way to look at it? Like to act like everybody's a robot and you're only focused on Indiana, then Maryland, then Michigan, right? Is there a bigger picture that can help Penn State? So yeah, it's a tough one. It's something that they're going to have to figure out. So we'll see.
I will say though, as someone who's been watching Penn State football for over 30 years now, I definitely remember during the Paterno era when they would just absolutely turtle up, go super conservative against Michigan and Ohio State, and lose to teams those schools fielded that on paper you think they should have beaten. Like one example, I'll think of 2007. That was the year where Michigan lost to Appalachian State and then got blown out by Oregon the following week. And it was pretty clear what the playbook was and how to beat that Michigan team. Like their secondary was so susceptible to quick slants, the pass, just also, if you have a mobile quarterback, which I guess Penn State didn't, they had Anthony Morelli, but if you have a mobile quarterback, you'd at least throw that wrinkle at them too. But it was pretty crystal clear how to beat them. And what does Penn State do? They go out this super conservative style. They end up not even reaching the end zone. They lose something, I think, like 14-9 or something. Like it's just an extremely frustrating game. Like that's a game they you would think they would have won, but no, they do that. And yeah, of course, every time they go play in Columbus against Ohio State, they would just go super conservative. And I remember when they finally won in Columbus again in 2008. It's the first time in like 30 years they'd done that. I remember being excited when they actually got double digits in points, because they couldn't even do that before. And so when I think of, coach tightening up in a game and not try, that's where my mind goes. I don't think Franklin's anywhere near that bad. I think, like I said, I think he has full trust in Yurcich and Diaz to run their respective units. I don't think you're going to see him, you're not going to see them scrap whatever game plan they have and go super conservative. That's not how you beat those teams. But anyway, thanks everyone for joining us for this marathon show. We hope you enjoyed the schedule preview. We hope, maybe learned a little bit more about what's coming ahead for Penn State. And I hope you guys enjoyed trolling each other in the comments. Couple announcements. Head over to Trojan Conquest Live. There's the link down below. The USC folks, the voice of college football, our future Big Ten foes, probably breaking down their season schedule, I'm guessing. And then John says, if we're going to watch Big Ten Live, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, here in the voice of college football, and then 8 to 10 with John himself on the Ocho panel. So thanks, John. And once again, thanks everyone for tuning in. For Tim and Patrick, we want to thank you all as well. We will be back 20 days from now after Penn State finishes their game with West Virginia, and we'll hopefully be, smiling like Pat is right now after that game is all set.
Perhaps shirtless as well. I'm one to potentially take my shirt off, whether it's good or bad, we don't know, but no promises on my shirt being on. That's all I'll say.
Okay, well, tune in for a potentially shirtless Pat 20 days from now for a post-game show after Penn State plays West Virginia. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in a few weeks.